president of a Kent-based marketing firm, and he has run against Smith for this House seat before. This afternoon's debate, commercial-free, it is happening on the campus of Seattle University. The debate is sponsored by the Washington State Debate Coalition.
Fox 13 and other local media outlets all contribute resources to these debate efforts. Today's moderator is Mary Nam from KOMO 4 News. And a reminder that ballots have been mailed out to Washington voters Election Day coming up on Tuesday, November 8th.
We will now switch over to Seattle University and the debate between incumbent Adam Smith and challenger Doug Basler.
Welcome to a live broadcast of a debate between the candidates for Washington's 9th Congressional District in the House of Representatives. This afternoon's debate comes to you from Piggott Auditorium on the Seattle University campus. With a special thanks to the Seattle City Club's Washington State Debate Coalition, in partnership with TVW, the statewide public affairs network, and KCTS 9, Crosscut. We also want to acknowledge the generous support of our many media partners and our sponsors, including AARP of Washington and Puget Sound Energy.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Nam with KOMO 4 News, and I will be your moderator for today's debate. I'll ask the two candidates this afternoon, Mr. Doug Basler and Congressman Adam Smith, questions about topics that are top of mind for voters living and working in the 9th Congressional District. And as you watch the debate, we invite you to join the conversation on social media using the hashtag on your screen, WAElects. The rules today are very simple. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening statement and 60 seconds for a closing statement. Candidates will alternate between having 60 seconds to answer initial moderator questions and 45 seconds for rebuttal per question. And please avoid using the words Democrats and Republicans in your responses, except when referencing actions taken by public officials within a specific government body. Please cite your sources. Talk only about your values instead of attacking your opponent's values. No personal attacks of any kind. Avoid stereotypes, jargon, and platitudes. Avoid interruptions and crosstalk. To the audience here today, we welcome you. You're here to observe and learn from the candidates and to gain a better understanding of local issues. Please remain silent through the debate except to applaud at the beginning and at the end of the debate. Take this time to silence your cell phones, please. Anyone making noise, disrupting the debate, or fellow audience members will be asked to leave this auditorium. We tossed a coin moments ago to determine who would go first. Mr. Basler, you have 90 seconds to give us your opening statement. Please begin.
Great. Well, it's great to see everybody today. Thank you for coming. My name is Doug Basler. I'm your neighbor. I'm a dad. I'm a small business owner down in Kent, Washington. You know, I wasn't born in Seattle. I chose to come here. I chose to come and move to the Seattle area. And I was so excited 20 years ago when I moved here. I used to take my kids and we'd go ride the monorail and see the sights and do things. And recently, I'm absolutely shocked, as are many of you, at how bad Seattle's become. We used to go down to Westlake. You can't go down there anymore. You see plywood everywhere, broken windows, crime, step over needles, these different problems. And I feel like these problems are a direct result of what is happening in our government right now. And so I've decided one more time to throw my hat in the ring and to become a candidate for Congress. I am absolutely committed to represent you and your family and your values in Washington, D.C. I will do whatever I can to reduce crime, to solve this homelessness crisis that we're having right now, to stop out of control inflation, and to help these energy prices. We got to get these energy prices down. I'm committed to do that, and I look forward to our debate today.
Mr. Basler, thank you very much. Congressman Smith, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. I Adam Smith. I'm the congressman who represents the 9th District. I grew up in SeaTac. I'm a graduate of Taiyi High School, and I've spent my entire life in the 9th District. My father was a ramp serviceman at United Airlines. He was a baggage handler. That's why we grew up in SeaTac. I am now married with 2 children, 22 and 19, and I'm running and have served because of how committed I am to this community and my lifelong connection to this community. I believe I understand the people here work very hard to listen to absolutely everybody to try to figure out what the best solutions are going forward. There are many issues that I work on, 2 that I think form the cornerstone of that. Number 1, I'm an absolute passionate believer in representative democracy, and what that means is your elected officials need to listen to you. That's always my top priority, to listen to everybody, not just the people on one side or the other. Listen to everybody in my district and try to bring people together to try and solve problems, to figure out how we can find solutions even if we disagree and move forward. Second, I passionately believe in equality of opportunity. I grew up in a blue-collar family. I want everybody to have an opportunity to pursue the life they want to pursue. I'm very focused on support for unions and working people, on support for education. I am a product of public schools. Both of my children are products of public schools. We need to give everybody in this district a chance to pursue their life dreams. That means good education, good health care, access to affordable housing, and all of those issues. So I'm committed to this district, and I'm glad to be here to participate in this debate.
Congressman Smith, thank you very much. Now, before I begin asking questions, I'd like to explain the Braver Angels community questions model, which is what we're using today. It asked voters across the 9th Congressional District to rank the 4 most pressing issues facing their own communities. And once those issues were identified, the nonprofit Braver Angels gathered equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats to take part in a 2-hour-long moderated conversation to discuss the issues and develop questions to ask you both. I'm here today to present those findings and moderate the conversation that follows. So issue number one. The top issue among voters in the 9th District is democracy, especially as it relates to the 2020 election. For some members of the community, it was ancient history, while others expressed concerns about continued barriers to voters' rights, as well as election security and invalidity. There are 2 pieces of bipartisan legislation on the docket that express these concerns: the Electoral Count Act, which recently passed in the Senate, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which passed in Congress last year, but then failed to pass through the Senate so far. Here is the question. What is your stance on these 2 pieces of legislation, and what steps would you support in making voting accessible while strengthening the security of our election system? Congressman Smith.
Thank you. I support both of those pieces of legislation. The Electoral Count Act is crucial. Most people don't understand this, but in the Constitution, or in a law that was passed in the 1870s, state legislatures can actually overturn the will of the voters in their state and appoint the electors to whoever they want. That is a direct threat to democracy, so I strongly support that. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act is to make sure that people have access to voting. We have seen laws passed in states across the country that make it more difficult for people to vote, particularly in dense urban areas. It is an abomination that in this country we see people lining up for 5 and 6 hours to exercise their right to vote. What if you're disabled, handicapped? What if you aren't able to stand in line for 5 or 6 hours? That's why mail-in ballots are so crucial. State of Washington, everybody gets their ballot, everybody can vote. I am alarmed by efforts to stop people's access to the polls. Again, as I said in my opening statement, representative democracy is the #1 thing that I'm passionate about. If people can't vote, that's under threat.
Thank you. Mr. Basler?
Well, I have questions about the integrity of our voting system, particularly in King County, Washington. I have been involved in a couple of lawsuits simply to say it's time for us to have a look at what's going on. They tell us that we need to trust the system, but we shouldn't have to trust the system. We should know that our votes are secure. And I'm always met with name calling and obfuscation Why don't we just look at the ballots? Why don't we just look at what's going on with these systems? I think mail-in voting is a disaster. There's been countless stories of people who mailed their ballot in plenty of time, but for some reason or other it didn't get postmarked. Their vote wasn't counted. I think we need to go back to in-person voting. I think it's time to get rid of these machines, count these things by hands like we've been doing for hundreds of years, and that we should verify and know that our elections are secure.
The Braver Angels-led bipartisan voters committee discussed concerns about how democratic norms were weakening and how disunity appears to be at the root of our difficulty in finding a way forward. How would you contribute to restoring civil debate? And please show examples of how you have worked with people you may disagree with to reach a common goal. Mr. Basler.
That's a great question. So in 2018, I worked with 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and we requested hand recounts of just a few precincts in our races. During that time that we worked together, I found that we had much more in common than we had in differences. We all want safe neighborhoods. We all want our kids to grow up and have great opportunities. And I actually had 2 of my friends from this coalition on election integrity that actually switched, and they're now Republicans. And so I asked them why, and they said, well, they've lied about, you guys don't hate old people, and you guys don't hate the poor. You guys are regular guys. And we thought, if they're lying to us about that, what else are they lying to us about? So I think it's time to just have those conversations and work together on projects.
Congressman Smith, can you please give us examples of how you may have worked with people you may disagree with to reach a common goal?
Absolutely. But first, I want to really emphasize, we have election integrity in this country. There are systems to check the ballots. Ballots are checked. There are lawsuits that are available if something comes up. The elections have been checked and double-checked. I believe we have integrity in this country, and I believe it is incredibly dangerous to imply we don't without specific examples of fraud, which have never been brought forward. So I think our elections are secure and should be treated that way. Actually, I'm the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, which is the most bipartisan committee in Congress. Every year that I've been there, we have worked together, Republicans and Democrats in the House and also Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, to pass the National Defense Authorizing Act, which has accomplished many things, but more than anything, it's gotten Democrats and Republicans to work together. We introduce a bill, we work it through the committee in a bipartisan fashion. Mike Rogers is the ranking member on the Armed Services Committee. After this next election, one of us will be chair, one of us will be ranking member. We'll continue to work together as well as we do right now.
The second most important issue among the 9th District voters who took part in the Braver Angels survey is crime. Although ranked second, this took up the most time. Many shared stories about how they or family members had recently been impacted by theft or violence. One such story locally involves the murder of Devon Pickett Jr., a star Seattle University basketball player and graduate, a small business owner, and a rising community leader. Others shared concerns that law enforcement agencies lacked the resources to address crime and help keep the community safe, and along with the concerns that the root causes of violence are not being addressed. One way to address the lack of policing is to use new surveillance technologies like the Amazon Ring, which is a security camera that many homeowners use. Amazon has partnered with more than 2,000 police departments across the country to obtain footage, in many cases without the homeowner's permission. However, this also raises concerns about the role of surveillance technology in community safety and privacy protection. So question number 1. With this context, please explain your stance on the new American Data Privacy and Protection Act introduced in Congress this year. Congressman Smith, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the what?
The role of surveillance technology in community safety and privacy protection. People want to know what your stance is on the new American Data Privacy and Protection Act. That was discussed in Congress.
That's a niche part of the larger problem. I am concerned about creating a surveillance state, and I think individual rights need to be protected in doing that. I am also very concerned about crime, and I think our community needs to respond better. We are down like 20% police officers in Seattle and King County. We have a backlog of prosecutions in the King County Prosecutor's Office of some 5,000 cases. We do need more police officers, and we need more prosecutors, and we need to have a functioning criminal justice system. We can reform that system. Look, I completely agree that the mass incarceration that was done clearly had a disproportionate impact on people of color, clearly locked up people who didn't need to be locked up. We need to reform that system, but that doesn't mean that we don't enforce the law. I have been working very closely to try to push this issue to get us back to the point where we have a functional criminal justice system that is fair and takes that into account. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on that going forward, and I am absolutely committed to making sure that we enforce the law in this community, and I understand how much work we have to do to get that done.
Thank you. Mr. Basler, can you give us your thoughts as well with regard to the rising crime rate as well as protecting privacy in our community?
Right. Well, privacy is absolutely essential, and I don't support loosening restrictions on privacy. As far as crime, I think we can all see that defunding the police was a massive mistake, a disaster. Our crime has doubled here in the Seattle area. I had my office building where my business is located was broken into 5 times by the same person. I was able to track him because he stole one of my iPads, so I went and got his picture, his license plate. I finally had to have coffee with the chief of police in Kent and say, you know who this guy is, why don't you arrest him? He said, because prosecutors don't prosecute. I said, you need to get him and then I'll deal with the prosecutors, which is why I endorsed Jim Farrell. But I've been at Big 5 shopping. People come in, take what they want, they go right out the door, they don't pay. This has got to stop. This is a direct result of Democrat policies on defunding the police, and we need to change it. If you want to change it, vote Republican.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basler. And I'd like to remind the both of you that you do have opportunity for a rebuttal, if you so wish to.
Sorry,
that
good.
we do have time for that, Bill.
I just have a quick comment on that, then, if
Please,
that's okay.
go ahead.
So that's actually one thing Doug and I have in common. I endorse Jim Farrell as well. He's the mayor of the city of Federal Way, which I've represented for some time. I think his experience is much needed in the prosecutor's office, so we do have that in common.
A follow-up question, and again, a reminder that these questions were comprised by members of people in this district, and these are their concerns, and that is how these questions came about. So question number 2, how do you plan on balancing the accountability of military spending with community safety? Congressman Smith.
Sorry, balancing
the accountability of military spending with community safety, and I believe this probably has a lot to do with militarizing local police departments.
I think I know exactly what it has to do with. There's a program in the federal government, the 1033 program, that allows the transfer of excess equipment from the U.S. military to local law enforcement. And we, under the Obama administration, that was reformed so that you weren't sending military-grade equipment, so you're not sending like, Humvees and high-capacity magazines and really military-grade equipment to local law enforcement, and I support that restriction. Now, a lot of the 1033 program is simply transferring excess, some of its technology, some of its vehicles, some of its stuff that's not, military-grade. I think if we had that, extra equipment at DOD, that can help out law enforcement, meet some of the budget demands, because I do agree that, we have lost too much in terms of our police force. We're down police officers, so anything we can do to help with the budget can help with that. We also need to reform how the police does their job. I understand that. But I don't support transferring military-grade equipment to our local law enforcement. I don't think that's what the purpose should be.
Thank you. Mr. Basler.
Yeah, certainly I don't support militarizing our local police, but what I do support is giving back our police their power to enforce the law. So this non-pursuit nonsense where people can just drive away, they don't have to stop if they're being pursued. They've taken the level from a reasonable suspicion to probable cause. They've done a lot of these things that absolutely hurt our law enforcement's ability to protect us and our families. And this has got to stop. We need to go back and roll some of this stuff back. We need to support our police. Police are leaving Seattle in droves because they're not supported, because they don't feel like people care about what they're doing. And the results are obvious when you see the plywood on the windows. I often say people that shop in glass stores shouldn't vote Democrat.
It sounds like both of you are in agreement when it comes to your stance on militarization of local police. So I'd like to ask both of you the next question, which is, what are you going to do to ensure the police in our community are held accountable? What other measures will you put into place to ensure community safety? Mr. Basler?
Right. Well, so training is absolutely essential. De-escalation training and helping, using non-lethal methods to subdue people that maybe are resisting. And we have a huge issue. So every week I go down and I feed the homeless, and I do a thing called street church. And the thing that we see out there is we see addicted people. We see people that are really down on their luck, and we see people that are mentally ill. And so we need to look at those core issues and help our police to be able to understand, hey, they're dealing with a mental illness, and get the right resources that they need to do the job. But we've got to keep the public safe. We've got to keep neighborhoods safe. I have 5 kids, all boys except for the 4 girls, and I'm very interested in keeping all of my kids safe. We shouldn't have to worry when our kids go to school, when we go to the store shopping. We need safety.
Thank you very much. Congressman Smith, can you also address holding police accountable and also keeping the community safe?
Well, I think that's absolutely necessary. And I have never supported defund police. It doesn't make sense. But that slogan and that concern didn't come from nowhere. Okay? There have been concerns about police not being accountable to the community. There are concerns about the excessive use of force. We need to reform the way we do law enforcement. But reforming it doesn't mean eliminating it or even cutting it. It means changing the way we do it. And that is the police reform that needs to be done. A couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now, I worked with Andre Taylor on a De-Escalate Washington campaign, which was a statewide initiative to try to hold police more accountable for their actions. I think that's necessary. We need to train them to de-escalate situations and to work more closely with their community. The other thing I've done is I am supportive of getting funds for a thing called Health One, which is the idea of having social workers and people respond to mental health emergencies. We use the police as the easy button to respond to everything, even things they're not qualified to respond to. Sorry, 60 seconds is really tough, if I may say so. So we need to reform the police while making sure that they still are able to do their job.
Mr. Basler, would you like to rebut?
No.
Moving on to the environment now, we're completely shifting gears. Braver Angels bipartisan community conversation turned quickly to the environment and the wildfires that we've all experienced this season, particularly in our state, and the smoke that impacted communities for days, some much worse than others. Question number 1. What are the top steps that you can take as a House member to help prevent the damage that we're seeing here in the western U.S. during the wildfire season? And what can the government do to make our communities more resilient to that?
Well, there's 2 things. Number 1, global warming is an actual thing, okay? And I know we're not supposed to talk about partisanship here, but partisanship actually is part of politics, and it needs to be talked about. And we have one of our parties in this country that refuses to acknowledge the reality of global warming and consistently fights every effort to get us off of a fossil fuel-based economy and actually build a clean economy. We need to invest in the things that are going to build that clean energy economy. And oh, by the way, that will help with inflation on gas prices. If you didn't have to buy gas, if you actually had an option, okay, an option to buy from solar and wind and all these other things, so that it wasn't just the oil companies controlling us. If we actually had that choice, that would bring prices down instead of being at the whims of Russia and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and everybody else. Make that investment going forward so that we have a clean energy economy alternative. We can absolutely do it. We have the technology. We have to commit to it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Basler, what are the top steps that you would take as a House member to help prevent the damage that we're seeing and to make our communities more resilient when it comes to the environment?
Right. Well, first of all, I think that we have to manage the forests. This idea of hands off and nature knows best. I'm a over 30-year youth pastor, believe the Bible. I believe God put us here on the earth to take care of the earth, to steward the earth. And you don't steward the earth by letting it do its thing. There's a story about a farmer that invited the pastor over one day, and he saw the beautiful barn and the fence and the animals and everything. And he said, well, God really blessed you with a beautiful farm. And he said, yeah, you should have seen it when God had it all to himself. So we need to take stewardship over these forests. Right now, they're putting out way more carbon, way more pollution than 100 years of SUVs in Seattle. So let's do that. We also have a huge problem with these homeless garbage dumps right next to the Green River in Auburn, where I live. I recently did a commercial there. Acres of garbage leaking motor oil into the river. I think the Democrats need to clean up their act before they tell us to give up our pickup trucks.
Would you like to rebut?
Yeah, I'm not telling you to give up your pickup truck. You could just go ahead and fuel it with clean energy. There are all kinds of options out there that we're refusing to use. And I'm sorry, but this is a really frustrating point. You know, it is always difficult to provide for the energy needs of people. We've got 7 billion people on the planet. How are you going to meet those needs? It's difficult, but we have developed new technologies. 20 years ago, everyone said wind and solar is stupid, it's too expensive. We invested, we made it so that it is vastly more affordable. Now, because we made the investments and we improved the technology, we can improve battery technology so that we store our energy for longer and transfer it better. We can make those investments, but we just got through with 4 years of the Trump administration where they gutted every single one of those programs and didn't make those investments. That's what we need to do.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr.
in
Basler,
the last 2 years, is your life better? Do you remember what gas costs in October of 2022 or 2020? I'll tell you, it was $2.17 a gallon on average. I just went by the ARCO this morning, $5.09. Okay, so that's the result of this. And Adam Smith said in Real Change News on August 17th, 2022, that we know what we need to do, which is to enact a very aggressive carbon tax, which I'm very supportive of. We need to make carbon-based fuels more expensive. That's his solution. He wants to tax us into prosperity. He claims he wants to grow the middle class. That hurts the middle class. That hurts the poor. Raising energy prices doesn't help us.
Not having a planet you can live on also hurts the middle class and everybody else.
Gentlemen, the bipartisan Braver Angels Committee has a follow-up question with regard to the environment. They would like to know, which government agency do you feel should be leading the way when it comes to the green energy transition? Congressman Smith.
I don't know that there's any one particular government agency. Actually, I think the people who should be leading the way are the private sector in a private-public partnership. They are the ones that are developing the technologies that are going to get us out of this. So it's not a government-led solution. I think we can absolutely have, the private companies. I mean, that's, the oil companies want to make money, and I don't have a problem with that. Okay, I'm a capitalist. I'm Adam Smith. How could I not be a capitalist? I believe in that. But let's make the investments in things that are going to make all of our lives better. And there are the technologies that are out there being developed. I mentioned wind and solar, but they're also developing hydrogen. I also think nuclear has a role to play in this as a potential clean burning energy source. There is progress being made, believe it or not, on fusion. As I mentioned, on battery storage. Let's make those investments so that people can go make money on a clean energy economy in the same way that they made money off of an oil energy economy. That's where I think the leadership should come from.
Thank you very much. Mr. Basler, what are your thoughts as far as which government agency should be leading the way when it comes to the green energy transition?
So I believe that basic civics teaches us that the federal government didn't create the states created the federal government. And this top-down approach, federal government telling the states what to do, I don't think is a good idea. I think the states need to set their own energy policy. I think the states need to be in charge of it, not a federal agency. I believe that the transition will come. I actually agree with him. It's how you can tell we're getting close to election day, because Democrats start sounding like Republicans. But this idea that the government can sort of do this this job for us. The private sector needs to do it. The Prius didn't come into existence because the government said we needed a better gas mileage car. It became because of public demand. And as we want better mileage, we want cleaner solutions, the private sector will provide it. Unfortunately, these electric cars, they're not that clean. These batteries, they got cobalt, not recyclable. They're heavier. Their tires put off more pollutants. Electric cars are not maybe the end-all, be-all that people think they are.
Would you like to rebut?
Yeah, just to say quickly, whether we're close to Election Day or not, when it comes to getting to a clean energy economy, we need Republicans to start sounding like Democrats, not the other way around.
Never.
I'd like to know what both of you feel on this particular matter. You had mentioned, Congressman Smith, that when it comes to green energy transition, some ideas, you would support the private sector taking the lead and doing what they feel is right and kind of leading the way that way. Mr. Basler, you had mentioned that this should be individual states' responsibilities. The unique thing about environmental concerns is that when a forest fire burns, the smoke rises up. It doesn't stay in that state. It drifts. When it comes to energy prices, it's never self-contained in one particular state. The whole country feels the effects of it. So I'd like to know how important, if it is important at all, your thoughts on whether this particular policy of energy efficiency and going green and environmental concerns, if it is something that really should be just within state borders, or if it's something that is best served addressed nationally.
Yeah, well, I still believe very strongly in states' rights, of course. And I think that, this idea that this is like the most critical thing for people is false. Right now, people are more concerned about their kids being safe, their neighborhoods being safe. We're more concerned about losing our freedoms. We're more concerned about inflation and these other issues. And this idea that we need to put all of this money and energy and time into that when families are hurting, I think it's a red herring, and I think we need to focus on getting ourselves back on our feet, getting our economy back on our feet, and making sure that people are free and have the power to innovate and create. And I believe that we will innovate and create and become as great as we have been, and that's where the answers are coming from, not from some government program.
Congressman Smith.
I think it's a red herring to say that we have to make a choice on that, as if either we have to address the issues that are in front of us today, or we have to try to protect the planet. I will say to you, I know we can absolutely do both. We can absolutely improve the economy. We can absolutely address crime. And we can absolutely build a clean energy economy that doesn't destroy the globe. There's no reason on earth why we can't do both of those things. And to present it as a choice like that is to totally misunderstand what public policy is supposed to be about. And when it comes to whether it should be states or federal, it should be both. There's absolutely a federal role. It should be international as well. The Paris Climate Agreement, we need to build on that to get other countries participating as well. But what we need to do, the oil industry has a 150-year head start of being subsidized, by the way, extremely subsidized. And that was fine. That was what our energy economy was. But if we're going to build an energy economy that has alternatives, tax credits, that's what incentivizes the investments we need from those private sector people to develop the economy we need. So we can do both, and we need to give tax credits so that the private sector and the public sector can work together to meet all of the needs of our community, not just to pick a couple of them.
Would you like to rebut?
Yeah,
Mr.
well,
Basler?
I'll tell you. The red herring right now is the environment. Those steps that they're taking to price you out of your car, to take your money and put it in government coffers, or to limit the production of oil-based fuels. These things are hurting us. They're hurting our kids' future. They're hurting our lives right now. And if we're going to do both, we need to stop limiting the energy production that we have. We went from being a net plus energy independent nation to an importer. So how is it any less dirty for us to get our oil from communist Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or somewhere else? I say we need our own energy sources here at home.
I have to say one quick thing about that. Right now, today, we are producing more oil and natural gas than we ever have in this country. It is an absolute myth that that has been reduced in the least bit. Now, countries like Russia and OPEC, they're trying to constrain that to drive up prices. And oh, by the way, oil companies are also trying to constrain production to drive up prices. We are producing more today than we ever have, and that is an absolute fact.
Mr. Basler, I'd like to ask a question.
I'd like to know his sources on that.
To
You said we
clarify.
should do the sources, right?
I'd like to ask you a clarification.
Because I think he's lying.
Mr. Basler, when
I'm
you
absolutely
you've
not
used,
lying.
excuse me, gentlemen, you've used the term twice, Mr. Basler, the term red herring when it comes to the environmental concerns and green energy policy. When you say red herring, and with regard to that, are you saying that the environmental concerns are not legitimate, or are you referring to the red herring being on the list of priorities that the country issues, problems that must be addressed, that it is should not be at the top?
I'm just saying
that these are not
good game. Drive down in Seattle, okay? Is that environment good? Is all that plywood and graffiti and homeless encampments on sidewalks in what used to be the most beautiful city in the Northwest, is that a clean environment? Is the homeless camp down there at Green River where they're dumping garbage into the water, is that good for the environment? Is a mismanaged forest that's burning and putting smoke in the air? See, they talk about clean, but they don't deliver. They don't do it.
Mr. Basler.
They talk, but when we look at results, they're not producing the results. I believe that we can clean up things and we can get there, but you don't get there by forcing people out of their cars with $7 a gallon, $8 a gallon gas. Washington State is poised to add another 46 cents per gallon to our tax burden in January. So this thing, you think it's high now? Just wait. If you want to change it, vote for the other guy.
You mentioned gas prices. That is going to take us transition us into the next question, which is what can or should congressional members do to lower the price of gas, both short-term and in the longer term? Mr. Basler, why don't you take that question first?
First of all, let's stop selling our strategic reserves to China. Let's use them for what they're supposed to be used for. And let's increase our domestic energy production. We need to finish the Keystone Pipeline. We need to increase our ability to refine fossil fuels, actually oil-based fuels. I guess it's not fossil fuels anymore. But we need to dramatically increase our energy production. We need to lower these taxes, these carbon taxes, these gas taxes that are not directly helping to build roads and infrastructure and that type of thing, but they're just lining people's pockets. We need to stop catering to special interests, and we need to care about what the kitchen table issues are and the family issues are for Americans. We've got to stop all the special interest payoffs and these types of things. And we need to let the private sector do what it does. Let's do what we do as Americans.
Thank you very much. Congressman Smith, what can Congress do to lower the price of gas, both short-term as well as in the longer term?
Right. Long-term, as I said, we need alternatives. Because the thing you have to understand about oil and natural gas, in which Doug apparently does not understand, is it's a global market. Okay, I don't believe Doug is proposing to not allow for the export of oil and natural gas. That would have a rather interesting impact on the market. So you allow for that export. So we are producing more than we ever have before. But it's a global market. So they sell it wherever they can sell it, wherever they can get the highest price. And the oil industry controls us. Okay, you just saw it when they restricted the amount that they were going to produce of gas. So as long as we are dependent upon oil to run our cars, we will be at the mercy of how they throw up and down those prices. We need to develop alternatives to that. We can develop alternative sources of energy. We're not getting rid of oil anytime soon, okay? But if you develop alternatives, then competitively the prices come down. That is both the short-term and the long-term solution to getting us off of this roller coaster that we're on.
Mr. Basler, would you like to
So
rebut?
Adam Smith said August 17th, 2022, you can look it up on Real Change News right here in Seattle, that he is not interested in lowering carbon-based fuels. He wants to make them more expensive. So if you want to have lower fuel costs, I would encourage you to vote for me and not for him.
That is absolutely untrue. I am not interested in increasing prices. What I'm interested in doing is giving us alternatives so that the oil companies don't keep increasing prices on us. That is the choice that we need to make.
Congressman Smith, can you explain the context of the term that he is
Well, the
referring
context
to?
of the question was whether or not, well, Doug wants to get rid of gas taxes, okay? I don't, because I think we need to build roads, okay? We need to have something that's going to fund that. Also, I want to make sure that we don't, and that the other context of that is, like I said, we subsidize the oil industry. That's what I want to get rid of, okay? We've subsidized them for 175 years. We subsidize production, we subsidize refinery, we subsidize the building of the oil. I don't want to subsidize the oil industry. I want it to compete with other sources of fuel so that we have that free market that Doug keeps talking about and actually have competition that drives down prices instead of being at the mercy of the oil industry as we are right now.
Thank you very much.
$2.17 a gallon under Republicans, $5.09 under Democrats. Do the math.
I'd like to ask you both gentlemen about your priorities, because right now the questions I've asked are coming from the bipartisan Braver Angels Coalition and voters here in the 9th District. Personally, what would your top priorities be if elected, Mr. Basler?
Top priority, we've got to stop this out-of-control spending that Adam keeps voting for, these trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar budgets that are not funded, they're not taken care of. We need to cut federal spending. We need to stop printing money. Simple economics tells us that if you add more money to the money supply, the money that we have will devalue. And so we're seeing out-of-control inflation based on these policies. And also, this energy situation is also causing it. We have diesel fuel at all-time highs, in which Adam says we need to, we need to make carbon-based fuels more expensive. That's what Adam says. And so as those trucks and trains that move our goods and services into our stores, into our communities, have to pay more to move those services, prices go up. So that's my top priority, is to get energy prices and inflation under control. Second, I definitely want to deal with the crime, the fentanyl crisis, and the southern border.
Thank you very much. Congressman Smith, your top priorities?
Top priority is affordable housing. That is one of the biggest challenges that we face throughout the 9th District and throughout the Puget Sound region that is putting economic pressure on people, and the cost of health care. I voted to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for seniors for the first time that we were able to get that done. So bringing affordability down. It's not just energy prices. It's food, it's housing, it's health care, and we're going to continue to do that. It is also worth noting that since 2020, we had a global pandemic that massively disrupted the entire supply chain, and oil prices have gone up as a result of that, and Russia did their brutal invasion of Ukraine. So it's not just, well, there's a Republican in the White House, energy's cheaper. There's a Democrat in the White House, energy's cheaper. A global pandemic and the worst war we have seen ever. That is what is driving up our prices. And neither one of those things is going to change just because you happen to elect a few Republicans. A sensible energy policy is what is going to change that. But my top priority, if I had to pick just one, it's affordable housing. That's really pricing people out of the market in our region right now.
Thank you very much. Rebuttal?
Like I said, I don't believe that the results that we're getting from the current administration, the current Congress, are what we want. And I think we should try something new.
You both had mentioned inflation in not so many words, but a lot of people, a lot of economists, it's been a point of debate. Are we headed toward a recession? Are we already there? Are we dipping a toe in it? Can we improve things? Can we turn things around? With regard to raising interest rates and inflation, how can you protect consumers and the people in your district from these rising prices?
Well, we need to understand what caused those rising prices, and that's really the difference of opinion here. And the two biggest things that caused it, like I said, was the global pandemic and disruption of the supply chain. I mean, China is still locking down large cities and impacting the global supply chain. One of the things that we've done in Congress is the CHIPS Act, to be less dependent upon China for that, to actually, build a better supply chain. So getting the supply chain back growing is the #1 most important thing. And then the second thing is helping Ukraine stop Russia so we can get to peace in that war. Those two things will have more to do with inflation than anything else. The out-of-control spending that Doug talks about is what kept so many businesses from going under, what kept so many people from being cast out of their homes, being unable to afford food. Because during the pandemic, about half the people were okay and about half the people saw their entire livelihoods disappear. And I want to hear Doug say that he didn't want to help those people. Okay, that we shouldn't have passed that. We shouldn't have helped people who were out of a job because of the pandemic, because that's what we did. And that is not what caused the inflation. What caused the inflation is a global pandemic and a war in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Mr. Basler, with regard to rising interest rates and inflation, how do you help the people in your district?
Right. So the pandemic was definitely the reaction of the government to the pandemic was an overreaction. We should not have shut down our economy. We should not have shut down these businesses. All the critical infrastructure, the food. I mean, I know people that still got toilet paper, right? They bought so much toilet paper. But the supply chain was not drastically interrupted. They're still there. But the government reaction to the pandemic, in the Bible, Jesus said, it's the sick, not the healthy, that need a doctor. And this idea that we could shut everybody down, lock people up, what we've done is we've devastated an entire generation of children out of 2 years of school that they have lost. There's increased suicide, depression, test scores are plummeting. The overreaction to this pandemic is absolutely a national disaster and a national disgrace.
I'd like...
If I could. I just want to highlight what Doug said there. He said the supply chain was not disrupted during the pandemic. And if you believe that, I can see why you believe that other things caused inflation. But trust me when I tell you, the supply chain was very much disrupted during the pandemic. And that is what we need to deal with it. Not deal with. Not acknowledging that problem isn't going to help.
Mr. Basler, I'd like to ask for some clarification because the question was about inflation. You addressed the pandemic in great length. With regard to helping families in your district deal with inflation, what do you think are some of the solutions?
Yeah, the number one thing we've got to do is get gas and energy prices down. That's absolutely critical. I think I've covered that several times. Secondly, we've got to get our government fiscal house in order. I support a balanced federal budget, and we need to begin to get the debt paid down. We need to strengthen the dollar and make the dollar strong again. The dollar should be the pinnacle currency. Right now it is the world's reserve currency, but there's even moves to move away from the dollar as the world's reserve currency because the dollar is backed up on basically the good faith in our government, and our government is not giving us a lot of reasons to have faith in them right now. And so this quantitative easing that started is now turning into a flood of money printing. Got to stop it. We've got to do the hard things. We have to do the difficult things, but we can do it, and we can get this thing under control. But we're not going to keep doing it if we keep talking about we got to get everybody free health care, we got to get everybody free housing, and all these different things. We have to let the free market and the American system work.
Thank you very much. Rebuttal?
Yeah, I don't know where we're at right now, but I just say the dollar right now is stronger than it's ever been, and that's a mixed bag, okay? But I mean, it is just point of accuracy. The dollar is really strong. I mean, for the first time ever, it's like parallel with the euro and the British pound. So it is stronger than it's ever been. That just creates its own set of problems. I just wanted to make sure we're clear on that point.
I'd like to move on to civic discussion, political involvement, and where the public, where the voters stand in all of this. This auditorium is far from being filled. And there is an attitude
well, we're not
towards
that good a show.
voters.
I mean, we've
There
worked on it years, but,
people work.
There is an attitude among voters that there's a level of disinterest when it comes to politics. Regardless of what side of the aisle that you are on, how do we engage more people to become politically involved, to become politically invested, to become more educated and wanting to learn and participate in our democracy?
You know, we used to teach civics in schools. I haven't been to school for a long time, but learning how the government works. I really enjoy the fact that here in America, we get to choose, and we get to make these choices, and we get to be everything that we can be as Americans. And we can't just ignore the trust that's been given to us by the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers wanted us educated. They wanted us to get involved. They wanted us to be part of the system. So I have, like I said, I have 5 kids. I have 4 of them are registered to vote, and 1 that doesn't. I'm working on them. But they're starting to see, I think the public is starting to see that if you're not interested in politics, politics is still interested in you. And if you want to see what we're seeing now, the plywood, the crime, the cars running, the missing catalytic converters, just keep voting the way you're voting or keep ignoring the way you're ignoring. But if you want to see change, then get involved.
Thank you. Congressman Smith, how do we increase voter turnout? How do we increase civic engagement?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be mindful of sort of the positive on that. Voter turnout in the last 2 elections has been higher than it's been in decades. People are actively engaging in politics on a level not before seen in my lifetime. So I think we need to recognize that people are actively engaged, and that's part of it. But you also have to be willing to actively engage in the most productive way possible, which is, working with people who disagree with you. I think my biggest concern is on both sides of the aisle, you create these echo chambers. You just hang out with the people who agree with you, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I believe in challenging assumptions no matter what. From both sides, you need to include people who have different views than you. Don't get locked into a certain way of looking at it. I mean, Doug keeps talking about crime, but I've been working very hard on the King County Council to get them to change their positions on that, to actually address that issue, to talk with people. And I think that type of approach to politics, don't just stay in your own lane. We had a lot of people involved. Let's start getting involved with each other, not at each other.
Thank you very much. We are taking some audience member questions as well, and I just received one. Can you please give us your stance on the U.S. involvement with supporting Ukraine?
Absolutely. I am 100% in support of what we're doing to help Ukraine defend itself. Russia is trying to, reestablish their empire, or I should say Putin is trying to reestablish his empire. He has no legitimate security concerns. Ukraine never threatened Russia. We don't threaten Russia. He invaded Ukraine because he thought, as he said, Ukraine's not a real country. They should be part of Russia. And he is brutalizing that population on a daily basis. But the Ukrainians, and I was there in Kiev, at the end of July, met with President Zelensky, toured some of the places where these war crimes had taken place, and saw videos and pictures of the atrocities. The Ukrainians are fighting back. They are taking back territory. And the way to end this war and stop the incredible disruption to the global supply chain is to prove to Putin he can't take Ukraine. He has to go back to the negotiating table. So I fully support helping Ukraine, with one exception. U.S. should not go to war with Russia. We should not cross that line, and neither should NATO. Support Ukraine, help them defend themselves, get Putin
Thank you very
to the
much,
peace table.
Congressman. Time is up. Mr. Basler, your thoughts?
So I have several very good friends that are Ukrainian, and even they are telling me this idea of writing Ukraine big checks with no accountability is a mistake. We left over $80 billion of military hardware in Afghanistan. Boy, we should have, could have used that. I want to know where the investigation is with the chair of the Armed Services Committee over here. We lost 13 Americans in Afghanistan with this botched withdrawal. Where are the investigations? Where are that? We don't even take care of our own problems. We need an off-ramp out of Ukraine. We need to get a peace solution there. We are playing with a nuclear-armed Russia, and it's time for us to start to de-escalate that and come up with a solution that leads to peace, and not just keep throwing money at this proxy war that Adam and his team want to play.
First of all, we have a bipartisan commission that I, on the Armed Services Committee, put in place to investigate everything that went into Afghanistan. I don't think Doug means to suggest that he wishes we were back in Afghanistan still fighting. I actually support both President Trump and President Biden in deciding that it was long past time to end that war. So we are fully 100% investigating that. And second, it's a very noble sentiment, but having Putin take over Ukraine, if we abandon Ukraine, that's what's going to happen. that's not going to make the world a more peaceful place, because Putin's not going to stop until he has to stop. So I don't think it gets us to a more peaceful place to abandon Ukraine to Putin.
You know, Vladimir Putin said that if they would just agree not to join NATO, that he would end his invasion, but we didn't want that.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
So there's other ways to peace than providing more arms, money, and I mean just plain money. Money disappears. Where's the accountability?
The accountability is that you can see what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. If Ukraine wasn't using the weapons, they wouldn't be winning. Let me assure you of that.
I have a question for the both of you. And the question that I'd like to ask, Mr. Basler, let's start with you. It's unique to your situation. This is your first time running. Can you give us an example or why you believe that voters should vote for you, that you can bring what you can uniquely bring to Congress, and
Sure.
why people should put their faith in you?
Well, it's not my first time running. Adam and I have faced off several times. It's my 5th time. So they call me the perennial candidate.
I guess what I'm saying
I keep
is,
asking him, just let me have it this time.
who has
maybe.
not first time running, but not having been elected?
Sure.
So why?
Okay, well, I've been an elected PCO. I served as the senior vice chairman of the King County Republican Party. I was vice chairman of the 47th District Republican Party. And, you know, I've signed the front of a paycheck. I do it every week for my employees. I work in the district. I help the homeless. I help at-risk youth. I think I have my pulse, my finger on the pulse of the district. I know what's going on in this district. I'm not living in a multi-million-dollar home in Bellevue. I live in a split-level Brady Bunch house out in Kent that needs remodeling bad. And I'm a regular guy. I'm your neighbor. That's the way this thing was supposed to work. We were supposed to elect our neighbors and our friends to go represent us in Congress and not career politicians like my friend Adam Smith.
Congressman Smith, you are a
Sure.
career politician.
Yeah.
You've been at this for many years.
I can take a stab at that if I may.
Why should, okay.
Yeah, I'm your neighbor too. In fact, that's one of the great myths. I live in this community. I have spent my entire life in this community. I never moved to Washington, D.C. I'm one of those people who actually sleeps in his office when he's back in D.C. I grew up in SeaTac, as I mentioned. I lived in Kent. I lived in Northeast Tacoma. I now live in Bellevue. People in Bellevue are people too, Doug. They really are. They're part of our district, and we need to represent them.
They're just rich.
And they're also a very diverse community that people largely misunderstood. But I've lived in 4 different cities there. My children went to public school in Northeast Tacoma. They went to public school in Issaquah. And one of them just graduated from the University of Washington. The other one graduated from Washington State. I shop at the local grocery stores. I work out at the LA Fitness. I am 100% committed to this community. And I think that's something to look at. Some people do get elected to Congress and decide that DC is a better place than here. I'm not one of those people. I'm 100% committed to this community. My family is committed to this community. And that's why I love this job and why I want to keep doing it. I have an opportunity every day to help the people who mean more to me than anything in the world. I can't ask for anything more than that.
Thank you very much. That did sound like closing statements, gentlemen, so that paired well. All right, thank you very much. And that is it for today's debate. We have run out of time. I would like to thank both of you for being here today. Mr. Doug Basler, Congressman Adam Smith, thank you so much for your time and being with us today. I'd also like to thank the nonprofit Braver Angels organization for organizing this debate. Don't forget, Election Day is Tuesday, coming up in 2 weeks, November 8th, and you will need to get your ballot postmarked by that date or into a ballot drop box by 8 p.m. that night. I'm Mary Naum for all of us here at Gottlieb Auditorium at Seattle University. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.